Hey, it's Wednesday. Welcome to the show. My name is Mike. This is the Leadership Toolkit. As you know, your definitive leadership growth podcast. And what we do is I have amazing leaders. I have entrepreneurs, business management, coaches, people from all different walks of life, people from all different verticals of business come on the show each week. I've been so blessed with some just phenomenal guests to be able to share their successes with you. And sometimes we talk about failures and, hey, here's what not to do because we learned from it. So we don't want you to repeat it. And so I've just had some really amazing guests each week. And this week is absolutely no different. I'm really excited because this week I've got Amy Pechacek on the show. I think I said that right. She coached me beforehand. Amy Pechacek, she's a leadership expert. She's a keynote speaker, founder of Alpstra.com. She's got, her focus is authentic leadership and personal growth, which is something I think we so need right now in every workspace. You pick the workspace, you need authentic leadership, you need personal growth, and you need that leadership development. And that is what Amy is going to bring to us today. We're going to have an absolutely awesome show. I'm excited to welcome her to the show. So Amy, thank you so much for joining me on the Leadership Toolkit today.
Hey, thanks for having me today, Mike. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Well, hey, if you would first, would you just share a bit of your background? What is your leadership story? Where did you come from? How did you get started in business? And then what led you to Alpstra.com and what you do now?
So, going back after college, I actually was a teacher. So I taught 8th grade math most of my career. And after teaching, I worked for a software company where I was in charge of learning and development. Eventually became like over the entire training and development company or part of that company. And so we did everything from helping with sales training to customer service. We actually created training materials and programs for customers. And so it was internal and external training. And then after that, I was recruited by McGraw-Hill Education on the higher ed side. And it was kind of like this perfect mix between I had been a teacher and I had worked in software and IT at the time when McGraw-Hill was going from traditional paper textbooks to doing their online and digital textbooks programs, things like that. Went to work for them, did sales, moved into leadership roles, helped create their implementation program, the first program they had that was pushed out throughout the organization. And so, I did a few things after McGraw-Hill, but at some point in my life, I had this big event happen, and it changed the way I viewed what was happening in the world and how I viewed life and all of that stuff. And because when I had these other positions, as a teacher, even as a teacher, I did public speaking, but at events and things. So there at the software company at McGraw-Hill and all these other things I was doing, I did a lot of talks. And so I was on stage quite a bit at conferences and conventions. So some of the heads of colleges, my area went all the way at different times from Texas to Florida up to Kentucky. So I was kind of in the South and the Southeast, amazing colleges that you go to. And some of them would start asking me to come speak before school started to like inspire their teachers. Or sometimes I would go speak for their students on the side. And then when this event happened, I kind of started being asked to speak at events like for inspiration, motivational speaking, and things like that. And so I was working for corporate America, and I was doing all of this stuff on the side. And it came to the point where it was like, are you going to keep working 2 jobs? You're going to keep working a traditional job that you work for an employer and doing all this stuff on the side, or are you going to finally take the leap and go out on your own? And after years of resisting option B, I finally took the plunge, and Alpstra was born.
That's awesome. So first off, thank you for sharing the story, because I know, lots of times we go back and we start to think about the things that either happened to us or through us and how we navigated those things. So I appreciate you taking the time to share through that. Can I ask, because you said it was while you were at McGraw-Hill, you said you had an event happen that changed everything.
Yeah.
Can we go down that path? Because is that okay to
Sure.
discuss? Okay.
Yeah.
So what sort of event? What made your shift? What was the catalyst for this?
Well, Mike, I was a widow, and in 2016, I left my husband, moved into an apartment out of our family home, and about less than a month later, he broke into my apartment one night, drew a gun, and chased me around the apartment, trapped
Mm.
me in a bathroom, and eventually took his own life. During that time, I didn't know if he would take just his life. I didn't even know he was going to take his life. I thought it was going to be me, right?
Mm.
But I
Yeah.
didn't know what was happening, and I literally thought my life was going to end that night, but his did. So he took his life, and he did it right in front of
Uh, I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't know that. Like I knew you mentioned that just as we were getting started, but that's um so from that point then I mean, what sort of things in your life did you see that started to shift? Can you think about sort of the emotions for yourself? Like, okay, hey, this is what's going to happen. What helped propel that catalyst forward?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit of what happened and then how my mind shifted. But
Yeah.
when that happened, I felt like I didn't really have a choice. Maybe I had two choices. Those two choices might have been either to metaphorically just go lay down in the ground with him, right? And give my
Mm.
life up and just quit. I'd already been through enough bull crap before that happened. That the fact, people would always say, "How are you still standing?" Because I'd been
Yeah.
knocked down and knocked down and knocked down and knocked down. Not as a child. I had a great childhood, so I want to make that clear for my parents.
Sure.
Okay. They gave me a great childhood.
Right.
But as an adult, as soon as I stepped into adulthood, it was, spousal abuse of every kind you can imagine, and just all of the things that go along with that. And I probably had lost myself and my identity and what I did for a living and my career. And that meant that I missed a lot of big, important things in my children's lives. I missed my daughter's 16th birthday.
Mm.
Um, I missed her ring ding ceremony, which was when they go from being a junior to a senior. The seniors leave at the end of the year, those 2 or whatever weeks before they leave
Sure.
early. And the juniors officially become seniors. I missed that event. And I missed them because I was on the road traveling. And I would sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I would be gone for 2 weeks at a time. So, like I told you, the area I covered, let's say
Hmm.
I was in Mississippi on a Thursday and I needed to be in Birmingham that Friday and then Nashville the next week. Well, it didn't make sense to come home and go back. So I would just stay over the weekend and work. So, yeah.
And that was while you were with McGraw-Hill. So that was while you were
Mhm.
still sort of serving two masters, so to speak, right? You were doing the McGraw-Hill thing. Hey, it fits technology. You were doing training, and they were sending you all over the place. So that's that time frame.
Correct. Yep. And I love McGraw-Hill, don't get me wrong. It was a
Yeah.
fantastic organization. I just was working like my life away. I was working nonstop till 10 o'clock at night, on the weekends, on the road all the time. Now I was also doing really well and a high achieving, high performer, but at what cost, right? So what was the cost of being on the road all the time? And so when my husband took his life and all of the emotions and feelings that go around that, I'll tell you a little side note. Um, McGraw Hill, our CSO, I believe it was,
Yeah.
called me when that happened. And he said, Amy, you take as much time as you want. You take as much time as you want, as you need. And when you're ready to come back to work, your job will be here. Well,
Wow.
Mike, I think I took 4 days off. So during that time, I was sitting in my office one day and I just kind of had this epiphany like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? Again, because of all the stuff that I'd gone through, that abuse,
Sure.
and I think trying to put on a mask, a happy face, getting my self-worth through accolades and awards and the title I had or whatever it was, that it was like this is, the words that I speak say that my family matter. The words that I speak say that my friendships matter, but my actions aren't aligned, right? And I had already started getting really curious about human behavior, psychology, leadership, all of
Hmm.
those topics, because at the software company that I worked for, I had what you would call a bad boss. And then at McGraw-Hill, I had the best boss I've ever worked with. And that got me curious about human behavior and leadership and those differences. So I had already spent years studying this stuff when that event happened. And it just took my studies and my interests a different direction. And then I had to learn how to take off my masks that I was wearing, whether it be at home with friends at work, and just be Amy, just be
Sure.
Amy. Um,
So, so let me ask you a couple things. And if I ever, hit a nerve on any of this, you just tell me and we'll shift gears. But I'm curious because for anybody that's tuning in, like as we were talking beforehand, and like I said, you made mention of this event. I didn't realize. So as we're talking, because you present, and anybody who's tuned in watching goes, oh man, Amy's got it together. They look at your website and you look at all the stuff you do in leadership training and so forth. And it's like, man, you are, and I mean this completely respectfully, like you're the picture of what, women in leadership want to chase after, what many leaders want to chase after. Right. And so they go, wow, man, she's crushing it. Right. And you're like, yeah, but there's all this backstory. There's all this other stuff. And so I'm curious because going through that, I think sometimes, and there's a little bit of a metaphor for many leaders. When we're in that, leaders, entrepreneurs, business people, we don't realize when we're in it. Right.
mhm,
So like you were saying, hey, I lost myself and my identity into my career. So you're pouring yourself into that because, and I've been completely guilty of that as a leader. Like
mhm,
I got the awards, I got the accolades, I got the certifications, I got all the things. And so that is like sort of a band-aid over some of the other things that actually really matter.
right.
So when you're, for somebody like yourself and is talking to you through this, and I understand that is a catalyst. What are some of the actions that you started to take to say, okay, I'm going to break free from this? Do you remember like, and whether it was this event or, before or after, once you realized, okay, this is where I'm stuck. I built that. And as leaders, we often do it to ourselves,
Yeah.
right? We lose ourselves in that. We get socked in and we think, well, this will, my kids will be proud of me because I got all this cool stuff, these cool
Mhm.
accolades. Well, my wife will be proud of me because I'm bringing home this good paycheck, or vice versa. My husband will be, right. And so once you had the realization, and I understand for you, and unfortunately, tragic event helped to bring to that realization. What would you advise somebody that maybe is trapped and they're feeling trapped in those spaces? Like you were saying, I went through abuse, I went through this stuff, and sometimes we abuse ourselves. What are a few actions that somebody could start taking right now to start to break free from some of that? Could you advise someone of that?
One thing somebody said to me that made a huge difference, and you've probably heard it before, but when it
Hmm.
hits after something like that, I think it kind of resonates at a different level. And what she said was, she said, Amy, you have one life. You have one life. What are you going to do with your life? And I started thinking, about all the mistakes that I've made. And people say all the time, hey, it's a mistake. You live, you learn, you grow. And I completely agree with that. But what my husband did, even if he considered that to be a mistake, he can't take it back. There are no do-overs, right?
Right.
So knowing that any day, even you and I were talking about a young lady who lost her spouse through
Hmm.
an accident, right? You
Hmm.
never know how long you have to live. And so, I literally started doing a lot of deep thought, reflection, prayer, reading. I don't watch TV anyway because I don't want the people who are out there trying to program my mind. So I don't buy into the status quo, right?
Right.
I mean, and I started like questioning all these things I had been taught, even as much as, now I had a great childhood, like I said, parents never fought. There's no abuse. There's no substance problems, nothing. I mean, it was literally looked like a perfect Leave It to Beaver family.
Sure.
But interestingly, I was maybe taught or expected to be this quiet, sweet little girl, right? And I was anything but. I was loud and rambunctious and silly and playful and wanted to be in the spotlight. And I was, on dance teams. And I was really confused with who I was because this picture of who I was supposed to be was painted. And then this real Amy was over here just busting at the seams, wanting to get out. Not bad, like not a bad kid, but a kid who wanted to laugh and play and have fun and, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Where maybe kids back then, this is the 70s and 80s, were supposed to be, seen and not heard or something like that, especially in the South. But so as I was thinking about this, and I really truly believe I'm a strong believer, in Jesus. I have a strong faith. And
Yes.
I truly believe that when that happened, I was already a believer, but I just surrendered it all to God. I was like, I cannot get through this on my own. Like there's not a human being on earth who could help me get through that. And I knew he was the only one who could. And so tons of prayer, tons of just surrender. And heck, I'm still growing today. There are things I was running errands this morning before our meeting right now. And there was something new that he revealed to me in my thinking patterns. So it's just that relationship with him, that true relationship with him, not religion, not law, but the true relationship with him when you surrender to him and allow you to speak into you. Now, I don't speak about my faith on stage very often. I might, point to it here and there. But I truly believe that if I did not have that faith and I didn't have the strong support system that I had, I wouldn't have been able to get through it. But in a nutshell, all the things that I learned during that time period, I kind of package into a way to help people like be authentic, be high performers, lead a good life, and then be healthy in all of the areas of life. So I always say, if I can just save one person from doing what he did, that's what it's all about.
Phenomenal. I got nothing else other than just phenomenal. I know. Thank you for sharing all of that. I think it's amazing. And I think that the two things, I always try and pull these tidbits out of my guests when we're sitting and talking. And two things that I picked up as you're talking about this, and you're saying, hey, be authentic. And I encourage anybody, if you're listening to this podcast, whether you're listening later on Spotify, if you're watching us live on YouTube, wherever it is that you're tuning in, listen with a pen in hand, because there's always so much good stuff that comes out of people's experiences. And it's like through some difficult experiences, certainly that you've had to endure, the two things that I picked out that are just awesome is the comment, and you got to understand this. You live one life, and it's so simple and so profound, and we often need to be remembered of that. And so there's all of these other components that go into that life. You can't just pour yourself solely into one and get lost for all the others. So you live one life. The other thing I love, and I'm very much a man of faith myself. I've been stepping into my church and in my faith more so now as I'm getting older than I ever have in my life. And I love the fact that you said you lean on God, because I for anyone that's tuned in and listening, there is sometimes that there are some things that humanity just cannot comprehend. But when you put it out there to him, and I remember going through some of my own experiences, and I remember at one point you hit a place, call it, and it doesn't matter if it's in business, in leadership, in life, you hit this place, and you've heard this said before, Amy, where people say, oh, you just got to let go and let God. Mm-hmm. At some point, there's a difference between making that statement and truly understanding that statement. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I do. Absolutely, I do.
So like when there's this full surrender, that it's like, okay, just speak to me. So those two things, I think you got to come to that realization of you live one life, and then yeah, while we're going through all these other things, you absolutely have to lean on God. And I love that you brought that up. And then that, I mean, those are a couple of those things through those are those two pieces that I'm talking about, living one life and leaning on God. Those will help remind you and help propel you into being an authentic person, not just an
Sure.
authentic leader, right? An authentic version of yourself. Because as you were talking about, like your childhood, we all have these different masks that we put on. We have,
Mhm.
because people will act differently when they're in business than when they're in church, than when they're over at the families on Sunday for dinner and so forth. And the reality is, you got to be authentic and true to who you are. So, and
Yep.
we'll dive into that a little bit more here in a bit. One thing, before we get too far, because I always get past myself here, a couple of reminders. One, if you want to connect with Amy, and I always spell these out. So if you're listening to an audio podcast, you can get this. You can go to linkedin.com/in/Amy Pechacek. And it's AMYPECHACEK. So if you want to connect with her, and I'm pretty sure if you put that name in the search bar, there can be only one.
There's
Amy.
3 of us.
Are there really?
So the one is like the Wisconsin Secretary of State.
Okay, that's not her.
And then there's a brand new Amy Pechacek that one of my husband's family members just married. So now there's
Okay.
3 of us.
Okay. Well, then if you are looking for it, she is in the URL on LinkedIn. It's Amy
Yes,
Pechacek,
yes.
and you spell that name out. So you can find her there. Also, check out her website. As we've talked, she does leadership development and training, personal growth. It's alpstra.com, ALPSTRA.com. How'd you come up with the name Alpstra? Can I ask?
Well, to make a very long story short, there are
I got all
several
day.
people that I would send names and ideas to, and I had to
Mhm.
have every single one of them be in agreement on a name to make it go. So ALP is Amy Lynn Pechacek. My husband likes to say it's Amy Larry Pechacek. It's not. It's not.
Okay.
But don't tell him. And then I wanted it to be Star because we actually live on Star Mountain in Texas, which is more like a hill,
Okay.
the highest point in our county. And then the star is kind of like, to me, it's like your compass or more compass, like a guiding light, something like that. So I went to buy the domain for Alpstra, which to me sounds like an automotive company. Like you said, you had,
Yeah.
work in the automotive
Yeah.
industry. And I didn't think about that at the time, but man, that domain was like $14,000. But if I just switched those 2 little letters, it was $12.99, and I was all in. And I said,
Yeah.
Alpstra it is.
That coupon life started a business.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm with that. And it does, that Alpstar kind of, it does sound like something automotive. So, well, thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that. So I want to lean into something you said earlier. When we started talking, you made the comment, you said, "Hey, I worked at this one place and I worked with a bad boss.
Mm.
And then the next place I worked with the best boss in the world."
Yep.
And one of the things, because people that tune in and listen to the show, if you're in leadership or management, one thing I've always found so intriguing is what makes a bad boss and what makes a good boss. And I know there are certain things that may be a little bit subjective, right?
Hmm.
But there's also, common threads that go throughout just characteristics of leadership. So when you said, "Hey, I worked for one of the worst bosses ever," and you don't have to name names, right? When you worked for this bad boss, I want people to hear this, because what are the things because the interesting, intriguing part, kind of crummy part, is that it's like we remember those people and we
Hmm.
learn what not to do. So I'm curious, what is it about the bad boss that made him or her a bad boss? What are the characteristics?
Well, there were a lot of questionable things happening. He was the president of the company, and there was a lot of gossip that he would participate in, a lot of tearing down of people, bullying, workplace bullying, things like that. Thankfully, I didn't experience that myself firsthand, but
Mm-hmm.
I saw it happen with other people. And because I was over the training, a lot of the people at that company would come to me and talk and vent and pour their heart out and things like that. And I just saw how it impacted them, right? This
Sure.
degradation, just this degrading. Now he was a genius when it came to what he did, like the technical stuff, but the people skills, I mean, they were just torn down, and the culture was not good at all. The culture was one of fear, and like people were tied up and uptight and they were afraid. One of his philosophies was every once in a while, you just got to fire somebody to keep everybody on their toes. I mean, that was literally his
I've
philosophy.
I've heard that from people
Hmm.
in the past.
So, but there was also some other things that I won't necessarily get into because they could be legal issues that would happen,
Okay.
things that wouldn't fly legally or ethically. But a lot of it was just that culture that was created. It was a culture was created of fear where people couldn't be innovated. People like literally at 5 o'clock, you would see everybody. I believe that when you go to a company and at 5 o'clock, everybody's heading out there that door.
Yeah.
They're there for a paycheck, right? And maybe their heart and soul isn't in it. But and I could be wrong there, but at this particular company, it was like 5 o'clock hit, everybody left, the parking lot was empty, and yeah, it was just a culture of fear.
The 501 Express. So
Yeah.
let me. I want to. I want to recap that because and people. I want people to hear this because it is the sticky stuff. It's those
Mhm.
characteristics that stick with people and go, I never want to be that guy or that gal, right? And so the things that you said, he did questionable things, participated in gossip, work bullying, which to me says, and I've been in the car business a long time. So literally there were managers that would like scream, yell, throw chairs,
Mhm.
that kind of
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
And yes, that's for some of you maybe in the workforce that are going, I want to get in a leadership role. I've never seen that happen. It happens. It still
Mhm.
happens today,
Yep.
like behind the scenes, because people are scared. You said they had a culture of fear. People were uptight. There were unethical things and not acting out of integrity. Here's the biggest message for all of that Amy is sharing. As a leader, you are seen. It doesn't matter how good or bad you are. You are seen. People are watching you, and people are going to say something like in Amy's case. She's like, I was the director of training. I'm over this different place, and people are coming and telling me this stuff. And so you need to be aware. And I'm not saying you got, not to go back to what we were talking earlier. You don't have to put a mask on and be somebody that you're not. Uh, you not but and you do need to be kind to people at work. You do want to have a culture of collaboration. You do want to have a culture of winning and excellence and those sorts of things. People will not follow someone very long if they got to show up just for a paycheck and it's fearful.
No. Which is
So
why it was really easy when McGraw-Hill recruited me for me to be like, "Oh, heck yeah, I'm
yeah,
out. I'm going over here."
sure. So then what on the other side, what makes somebody a good boss? What are the things you said? I went over to McGraw-Hill and you just brought him up. He was the best boss ever. I mean, one of the things that you said earlier, not to put words in your mouth, but like he was human, sounded like he had some real understanding when you were going through stuff. He's like, hey, take the time. He actually saw the person, not the personnel, if that makes sense.
Sure. Um, so my direct supervisor, I tell this story quite a bit, but I think it paints like a really good picture of how amazing he was. We would have weekly calls or biweekly calls, and we would have a conversation. And I would leave that conversation feeling pumped and feeling really good about myself. And like he had just complimented me for an hour. And I would get off that phone and just feel like $1,000,000. Like, wow, he really believes in me. But later, when I reflected on our conversation, maybe the next day, later that night, the next week, whenever it was like, wait a minute. He wasn't complimenting me, he was coaching me. So he
Mhm.
was so good at coaching you in a way that you didn't even realize you were being coached. So I think that some of it is, and what I believe that he was doing is he would see my potential and he could see where my strengths were. And so he would talk about my strengths in a way that would help me develop them and grow them. Not only that, he completely empowered me to do anything I wanted to do or anything I needed to do to take care of my job, my role, my team. So I was empowered. New ideas. I mean, like I think I told you, I was
Mhm.
on the team that started that implementation team at McGraw-Hill. And I had a conversation with him about the fact that, hey, we're this like global company, and I was at a much smaller company where we had training and implementation for customers or clients, but we don't even have like a program like that. And so he was able to connect me with people, and I was able to share my ideas. And like I said, there was a group of us who worked on creating that program for that company. So being able to innovate, share ideas, speak up, all the things that, a leader, I believe it makes a really good leader. A lot of times we will work harder for people who believe in us. Everybody, I believe there's a place for everybody. They have a strength, right?
Mm-hmm.
You work with a person to develop their strengths and make sure that they're being coached and growing in areas that they're interested in, but that they're also talented in. And if it's not a good fit here, maybe there's a fit somewhere else on the team. And if not, okay, then it's not a good fit. But instead of trying to pigeonhole somebody into one role or one title, I'm not a huge fan of titles, but instead of pigeonholing somebody in one spot, allowing them to use their gifts, talents, and abilities. Some of the best ideas, some of the most innovative products that we use even today were born from people who just had an idea. They just had an idea and presented it to somebody who believed in it, backed it, and now we're all benefiting from it.
No, and I think that's super powerful, is the fact that, the interesting thing, so often I will ask, hey, what are good leadership characteristics? Or you said, what's the good boss versus the bad boss? Not the either or. A lot of times people will share the exact opposites, and you didn't do that. I think that's interesting. One, I would like to really compliment you on that, is you took the time to say, well, hey, there were these bad traits, and this is stuff that makes for not a good boss. What made a good boss, though, it was different things. The fact that he did coach, empowered, created innovation. You felt heard. I think that's something that leaders need to understand, is people need to feel heard and valued.
Let me give you one more example, if you don't mind, Mike.
Absolutely.
So again, we all have our skills. We all have our gifts. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm more like a visionary type person where I have these big ideas, can have those ideas implemented. But when it gets to the minute details, that's my kryptonite. An Excel spreadsheet is my kryptonite. How can you be in sales and training? Well, that's why other people are really good at that. Mm-hmm. So he would say, hey, Amy, I won't even look. I'll just tell you if something happens and you need to look at the reports. He said, I got it. I'll look at them. And if anything happens that you need to know of, I'll call you. Right. And he never called me. But I'll give you another example with those spreadsheets. So one of my very best friends, she is, she's like the head of accounting and stuff. I don't know that terminology because I don't like spreadsheets, remember? Yeah. But she does all that stuff for a living, accounting, CPA stuff. And so I do the public speaking and corporate training and things like that. And so one day I was on my way, it was probably about a year ago, I was on my way to do a talk for a new client. And we were talking on the phone as I was driving there. And she said, are you nervous, Amy? And I said, well, Leanne, do you get nervous when you open a new spreadsheet? And she called me snarky, and that's okay. But yeah, I mean, like, that's her gift. That's her skill set. Put her in front of a group of people, and she'd probably freeze up. Put me in front of a spreadsheet, and I'm like, look, I'm done. I'm out. So I think one of the things he did really well, which also makes him that really good boss, was he understood where my skill sets were and the value I could bring to the organization, knowing that I lack in some areas, and that's okay because there's other people who are really good at that.
Well, and I think that is definitely a characteristic of any good leader, is actually spending time with the people that report to you, spending time with those folks so that you can know. 'Cause it's one thing for you to tell me something you're good at. It's another for me to actually hear it from you and then observe that and see you in action. And the only way that you can, as a leader, really deeply know that is to invest time with the individual And I think that's important. The other thing that I think was really good that you said here a little bit ago about the good boss was they would put people, he would put people in places that isn't something they were just interested in, but that they actually had some skill set and talent for.
Sure.
Because it's one thing to be interested in something. I mean, for me, like I've been interested for a long time in learning to play the guitar, but I am not talented at any musical instruments.
Yeah.
So it's like I can be interested in it, but I am
Mhm.
not going to make beautiful music. So I'm not that guy, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah, I used to tell people that they kicked me out of Nashville because I couldn't sing. I want to sing. That's
yeah.
not my can't carry a
Not a
tune in a
gift.
bucket.
Listen, I sing magnificently if there's no audience present. It is unbelievable.
Exactly.
I am
I
so
get
good.
you.
Yeah, so good at it. Right. Hey, a couple reminders. We're a little ways through the show here. For anybody that may be tuning in and listening, you can connect with Amy on LinkedIn. It's Amy Pechacek, AmyPechacek. So you could look her up and connect on LinkedIn. Certainly mention that you heard it here. Also, you can check out her website if you're interested in professional development, personal growth, leadership training, executive training, diving more into authentic leadership growth and that professional development. Check out alpstra.com, ALPSTRA.com. So, Amy, one thing I want to be sure to get to today, because one of the things that I know you lean into in your training and coaching is how people can really focus on authentic leadership and how people can, one of the things that you need, and this has come up several times on the show, is you need a certain level of vulnerability
Mhm.
to be an authentic leader.
Yep.
And I think lots of people that get into leadership roles, I know when I was a young man, and I'll just speak for myself, like pride and ego get in the way of vulnerability, right? And you got to go in, you got to be this strong and confident leader. And then, which you do need. We do need strong, confident leaders, but also there's a time and a place for being vulnerable. And one of the things I always lean into is like, how vulnerable? How do you show vulnerability? Can you be too vulnerable? So I'd love to dive into that part of the conversation a little bit more. So, how to be a more authentic leader, how important is that? And then how does vulnerability tie into authenticity and leadership?
Well, my disclaimer right from the get-go is that authenticity is not an excuse for bad behavior. So I think
Love
in the
that.
world today, a lot of people say and believe, hey, this is just who I am, take me or leave me. And they use the term authenticity or my truth, you'll hear people say a lot, as an excuse to treat others poorly, right? That is not, when I talk about authentic leadership, anywhere near what I mean. But what I mean instead is, you said the word vulnerability, and Patrick Lencioni in his book, Five Dysfunction of a Team, he describes
Well,
that,
I've read
right?
that with our team.
Is that right? Have you?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. So that vulnerability is being able to to show that I'm a real person, right? I don't
Mhm.
have to wear a mask. I don't have to be perfect. In fact, if I am perfect, no one's going to connect with me anyway. I mean, you connect with human beings on an emotional level because of their flaws, not because of their perfections. Think about it. People who
Yeah.
you might view as perfect, it's really hard to connect with. So as a leader, being authentic, that does not mean that you are going to behave badly. And it does not mean that it means that you're not going to wear a mask. What it does mean is that you can be vulnerable, not oversharing, not to the point where it's inappropriate, because you do have to draw a line between, if there's titles and ranks between yours and the rest of the team, right?
Sure.
Like I always say,
Sure.
you can vent lateral or up, but don't vent down. So we're not going to vent
Absolutely.
down, and we're not going to have bad conversations that aren't positive down. But one of the most important things about growth is, most of the growth we've ever done has been from trial and error, making mistakes, figuring something out didn't work this way, but it works this way. And when I talk about authentic leadership, it's be okay, be vulnerable, be okay with admitting your mistakes. even if there are mistakes that you learned from 20 years ago, a lot of the things that I talk about are things that happened 15, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that I've learned from and that I've grown from. So be okay with having those conversations with your team members. That does so many things. Number one, it does help them see you as authentic, but it also creates a safe environment for them to make mistakes, to take calculated risks. So I like to use that phrase, calculated risks, which means empowering them to make decisions on their own. You can throw them a life preserver, but you're going to let them wade water a little bit. You're going to let them figure it out. Use that struggle muscle. So the authenticity part comes in is literally being yourself, knowing who you are at your core, knowing who you are. So we do the disc map at Alpstra, and I believe in it. I'm a DI on the disc map.
Okay.
Knowing who I am, that means, I have this strong, driven personality, but I'm also like to have fun, speak on stage and stuff like that. But knowing who I am, but also being able to adapt to whoever I'm speaking to. So if I'm speaking to someone with the exact opposite personality from me, being able to adapt my tone and my approach with them doesn't make me authentic and doesn't mean I'm wearing a mask. It just means I'm a good, empathetic person, right? And understanding how to relate to them.
No, you said a lot of really great stuff there. You shared a lot of great stuff. I love that, even right at the end where you're saying, and I try and sit here and take notes. So I got pages of stuff going on here that, empathy doesn't equal authenticity, right? They both live on their own. You're saying, hey, me being empathetic for someone doesn't equal the authenticity. Here's some things that I wrote down that I want to go back and I want to make sure that people get. You hit this earlier in that last little piece of conversation. It drives me up a wall when someone talks about my truth. There is no my truth. There is the truth. And especially as a faith-driven leader myself, it's like, come on now, that it just drives me up a wall. I love the statement that authenticity is not an excuse for bad behavior. Authenticity is just, like you said, it's being yourself. That doesn't mean you can treat people. You can't be a jerk and then expect people still to follow you. If you're a jerk, you're not going to end up being a leader for very long.
Nope.
I was going back here, and here's I think the theme of that last series that we just talked about, and the statement where you said be okay admitting mistakes. I think that is probably one of the finest definitions of authenticity that I've had on the show to date, because I've had lots of people that have talked about, or vulnerability, that have talked about authenticity and vulnerability. And a lot of times, especially, we hear vulnerability in leadership and people clam up and they're like, oh, I don't want to be too squishy, and well, can I share too much, and that kind of stuff. But the fact that you brought vulnerability into, just be okay admitting the mistakes. It's okay to say, hey, I screwed up. And people see you as real. And so it's both, right? They say, okay, hey, I'm vulnerable. I'm bruising my ego and saying I screwed this up. And then people see you as real, and that brings in the authenticity. Like, that's the bonus, right?
Yeah.
And the fact then that as a leader, one of the things that you could really, and you didn't say this in so many words, but so I'm filling in some gaps. You could get so much buy-in from your team when you're having that moment saying, hey, I screwed this up. People look at you and go, hey, he's really human, and so forth. If you looked at your team and genuinely just stopped and said, so I'm coming to you guys or you gals, how do you think we can fix this? And then just shut up and listen.
Yes.
You could, because then people are like, wait, he or she really cares about my opinion? Well, you already said you broke it. so you give them a chance to fix it.
An analogy I use is, here's the phrase, and then I'm going to share an analogy. The phrase is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. And
right.
My belief around that is, if I think I know it all, right, and I can't learn from anybody, there's layers there. The other part of it is, if I have the attitude like I'm the smartest person, But then also, if I am the smartest person in the room, then I probably need to go find some people who are smarter than me so I can keep growing. So you can look at it both ways. But the analogy I use, and I kind of hate to use this one because of the political environment, but I've used it through all the presidents that we've
Go
had
with
over
it.
the past over a decade, decade and a half, 2 decades. So it's not the current, it's not the former. It's like literally my same analogy for the past 15 or 20 years. But you think of a president and what do they have around them?
Their cabinet. I mean,
Yeah.
like they bring in their most who they believe is the best for a specific position.
Right. So they have subject matter experts in
Yeah.
very specific areas that are completely diverse and completely different from each other, as well as areas that he is not necessarily a subject matter expert on. But they
Hmm.
surround themselves with the brightest, the smartest, the best in those fields to advise him to make decisions. Right.
Hmm.
And so the way I kind of view myself at leading a team, I'm not the president of the United States. Let's just make that clear. But that's really what I like to think of is
Sure.
I can't know everything. Like literally the technology changes so fast today. Like, somebody sent me the other day something about, I don't know, the new Google Analytics and SEO, and it's completely different than what it was 2 years ago, right?
Yep.
I cannot stay up to date on all of that and continue doing my job well. So I have to rely on the subject matter experts, just like a president has to rely on subject matter experts. And I believe that somebody who is truly a good, authentic leader
Hmm.
recognizes that. And that's why they empower those people. They empower them to learn what they need to learn, get the resources they need to get, have the information, make the presentation, and advise me or
Hmm.
advise you on here are the top 3 options. But if I were you, I would pick number 1. And here's why.
No, I think that's excellent, and it's a great analogy. And I would say, I'll just say this: I don't care if we get political or not. Like that, I think many business people would do a better job at picking a cabinet than some of our recent presidential choices.
Probably.
Uh, so, um, yeah, I mean, I think business people. Plus, one of the things that makes that a little bit easier is it's not in the spotlight. You don't have so much other influence telling you who's right or wrong,
Right.
right? You know who's right or wrong, and it's so in that role. Um, so one other thing that I want to hit on, if we have the time, we're kind of coming to the tail end, but I do want to hit on this because one of the things that you've mentioned to me and you had talked about was um, how leaders need to be more self-aware. And especially in today's business world, there are so often we get set up on this path. We see the people that came before us, or we see or we create this vision of what we think this amazing leader should look like. And then we get stuck on that path, and that's where we go. Meanwhile, the world could be crumbling around us, and we don't actually have a clue.
And
Is
they have
that
their head in the sand, right?
Yeah. And they're like, well, no, this is the direction we're headed. Meanwhile, everyone around you is going, well, there's bombs going off and there's this, and this is the wrong direction. And, billing, accounting's headed the wrong direction. The spreadsheets are blowing out and all the other stuff. So a couple things, how compared to some of the other characteristics we've talked about of leadership, how important would you say right now self-awareness is for people, and how would you advise somebody that might be tuned in listening to the show that they can you know be more self-aware, get more influence from outside sources, actually pay it mind and change direction if necessary?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I believe to be true is that the higher up the ladder you climb, the more
Hmm.
important your people skills are and the less important technical skills are. So if you are a leader, so think about it. When you're in the individual contributor role, you need to know all those technical specifics, like we talked about the subject matter experts. But as you climb into middle management and then senior leadership management up into the C-suite, then at that point it becomes more about your interpersonal skills than it does about knowing the fine, minute details of the operation itself, at least in corporate America. Maybe not in the military. I don't know. I've never been in it. But in corporate America, that's generally how it works, if it works well, right?
Sure.
And so knowing that, then what happens a lot of times is people, as they get promoted, the same skills that got them that promotion will no longer work in their new role, right?
So true.
So you have to continue to learn and develop, but now you've got to learn how to deal with people. You've got to learn how to communicate to people. So communication is key. That emotional intelligence, like we've been talking about that for close to 20 years. Why are we still talking about it? Because people have head knowledge, but not heart knowledge, right? So they know what it's about, but they don't implement it. Okay.
Sure.
But truly, if you have a desire to lead a team, communication, I don't think you can ever improve communication too much. Every single company that I work with, that I've ever worked with, said one of their top issues, if not number one, was communication. So find a way to communicate transparently, make sure that the vision is aligned, get buy-in from people by asking their thoughts, like you mentioned earlier. But then it's getting feedback, being open to feedback. And I like to say feedback is a gift. Did you ever watch The Christmas Story with Ralphie?
Oh yeah.
You could
I
write
went and saw it in the theaters back
Did
in
you?
the, one of the best.
Okay. So this is the analogy I use around feedback. Remember when Ralphie's, I think it might have been his aunt or somebody, gave him that pink bunny suit for Christmas. Remember that?
Yep.
And his mother made him try it on. So he went upstairs, tried it on. He kind of came down, stood there at the landing and was moping. Dad
Sure.
laughed at him, said, "Go take it off." That dude took that bunny suit off faster than that, right?
Yes.
And he probably never put it on again. It was a gift, right? The gift didn't quite fit. He tried it on. It didn't fit him, who he was. So he took it off and never used it again. All right. So the way we can view feedback is it's a gift. Take the feedback somebody tells you, not constructive criticism. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about true feedback. Consider it, reflect on it, test it. And if it's something that you can implement to make yourself better or to grow or improve, then by all means, keep it. But it's not, take it off, re-gift it, burn it. I don't care, right? Yeah, I mean,
hey, Amy gave me this feedback one time, and I'd like to give it to you.
there you go,
Congratulations!
right? Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
hey, Amy, we're at the tail end here. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share before I take us out for the afternoon?
no, I would just encourage people to keep growing, keep going, and keep believing.
Great final words. Keep going, keep growing, keep believing. Love it. So a couple reminders for everybody. Make sure you can connect with Amy on LinkedIn. It's Amy Pechacek, Amy, AMYPECHACEK.
Correct.
And so you can check her out on LinkedIn. You can certainly check out her website at alpstra.com, ALPSTRA.com. And Amy, if you would just hang out for a minute while I take us out and close up the show. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, that is going to bring us to a close for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in and join me today. It's been absolutely awesome. Just a really fun, great show, good conversation with Amy. I would encourage you to connect with her. Do me a favor, for everybody that's out there and listening. One of the best things you can do is, well, first off, if you'd help the show grow, throw some thumbs up on the show, because that is one way that it triggers the algorithm on whatever platform you're watching on, that, hey, it's a good show, you liked it, and more people should tune in. Secondly, and most importantly, and this is why I do the show, if you know of somebody that could learn and grow from this show, share it with them. Take it and give it to them as a gift. We were talking there right at the end. Send the show as a gift. Don't re-gift it. Listen to the show. If someone sent this to you, listen to the show. So, but definitely that's one of the biggest things that you can do for people, because we want to grow not just ourselves, but the people that are around us and make a big impact when it comes to leadership. So thank you everybody for tuning in and joining me today. Until we speak next, stay great. See you next week, everyone.